The Scarf. Story by P.W. Scribner. Illustrations by Linda Pierce. Chapter 1. Civil War. A girl sat on a grassy slope, her cheek pressed against her knees. With her hands over her eyes, she could almost convince herself that she was listening to waves breaking against the shore down below, but that was just an illusion. The waters of the Atlantic were hundreds of miles away, and the Indian Ocean of her childhood home thousands of miles beyond that. No matter how hard she tried to pretend, the wild rushing sound down below came from indifferent cars hurtling along the interstate. The girl was Assia, and she had been sitting on the grass for almost an hour, escaping the fighting back home. It made her sick just thinking of it, and she did not want to leave yet, though she guessed from the shadows that it was nearly 5 o'clock. But then again, her guess could be entirely off. One of the many things she had lost when they had left their home 3 years ago for the United States was the ability to tell time from the shadows. Back home in Somalia, close to the equator, the shadows crept across the floor in a predictable pattern every day, month in, month out. That pattern had been her clock. She had always known what time it was by how far the shadows had moved across the floor. But here in the United States, the path of shadows changed every day. That was just like America, Assia thought. You couldn't rely on anything here, except that it would change tomorrow. I'll never get used to it, she thought. But then she spoke to herself sharply. Of course you will. You've gotten used to far harder things than this. That was true. It was amazing what she had gotten used to ever since the war had come to their village. She had only been 7 years old when it had happened, too young and too naive to understand to what extent her world was coming to an end. She hadn't understood because most of her world was right there with her, trudging across the desert. Mother, father, her brother, Asame, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. The things she had seen the day she got lost. She stopped herself from remembering. Whenever she thought about that day, a feeling of emptiness filled her. It made her want to bury her face in her mother's skirt, as she had when they had finally found her, cowering from the crackling of the guns. There was no need to remember it anymore, now that she was safe in the United States. Safe, but unhappy. I don't like America, she said to her knees. You're ungrateful, a voice reprimanded in her head. Lots of people would give anything to get here. I know, Assia answered herself. I'm like someone rescued from a shipwreck. I know I shouldn't complain. And yet, in the solitude of the slope of green between her house and the highway, she felt she needed to complain, just a little. For her, America was like a piece of packing crate she was clinging to after a shipwreck. A drowning person would, of course, be very grateful to have such a piece of floating wood. But was it so unreasonable to imagine that such a person might still long for land? Because that was how she felt, as if she were still being tossed here and there on the waves, not drowning, but never quite safe. She heard a sound now and turned. It was her brother, Asame. He was lumbering down the hill, his feet slipping around in his massive untied sneakers, and her heart sank when she saw him. She could tell from his face that he was not done fighting with their parents. "Didn't you hear me calling you?" he asked. Asame sat down beside her, voluminous in black shirt and shorts, his hat turned backwards on his head. "You'd better get your ears checked," he said, looking down at the speeding traffic below. "You're probably going deaf from sitting here all the time. What are you doing here anyway? This is a crazy place to sit." "I just wanted to be alone," Assia said, more to herself than to her brother. She had answered in Somali, but Asame ignored it. Assia was hardly surprised. She couldn't remember the last time he had spoken anything besides English. "Why?" he asked her now. "It's not like you were the one fighting with them." Assia winced. There had never been a them
Sample complete. Ready to continue?